Zhang Henshui's Golden Fen Family Chapter 12. Surrounded by Hu Yue, you can express your feelings as much as you want. The Battle of Shuqing is intended to be a mediator. Yanxi and Mrs. Leng were talking outside, and Qingqiu had already heard them. She thought, the Jin family is a wealthy family, so I would like to see how wealthy they are. At first I was afraid that my mother would not agree, but later my mother agreed and I was very happy. He immediately opened the box and looked for clothes to change into. Because Qingqiu couldn't bear to return the beaded hoop that Yanxi gave her, she took it day by day and accepted it in a blur. Qingqiu thought that since she was going to a wealthy family, she shouldn't look like a small family, so she took this bead circle with her. I had just changed my clothes when the car horn rang at the door. Sure enough, a car came. It was sent by Miss Jin to pick up Miss Leng. At the same time, the driver handed over a business card of Jin Minzi. Mrs. Leng kept putting Qingqiu in the car. She saw that this car was more exquisite than the one Yanxi often rode in. I thought to myself, rich families are really different. Even the cars the women ride in are extra beautiful. Qingqiu got in the car and arrived at Jinzai in a matter of seconds. As soon as the car stopped, Yanxi was standing at the door. When Qingqiu got out of the car, Yanxi came forward and said, "My sister is waiting for you. Let me guide you." After saying that, she walked ahead as expected. Qingqiu took a closer look and saw that at the gate, there was a square open space, 4 pillars on the ground, a one-frame building, and a red lacquered gate. There are 2 rooms facing each other downstairs. Once here, there is another large courtyard, with a row of high-rise Western-style buildings facing the front, and a concierge at the bottom of the building. The footmen inside and outside the porter, all stood up with smiles on their faces. After entering this heavy door, there are corridors on both sides, surrounding a building. Yanxi did not enter this building, but walked around the corridor. In the hall at the back, the doors and windows are all painted red, which is eye-catching. There is a platform on the hall, and behind the platform, there is a red building with 4 corners. Around this house, half cypress trees and half willows are planted, and the red and green contrast with each other, which is very brilliant. When we got here, we saw female servants, who always stepped aside early when they saw people coming. Right here, in the shade of the willows, 2 moon doors flashed out. Entering the moon gate on the east side, a mountain-like pile of grapes covers a boat hall with white walls and green paint. The small corridor outside the boat hall is surrounded by large and small bonsais, with fat and thin rings, dark red and light purple. A boat hall is surrounded by thousands of flowers. Yanxi smiled and said, "Miss Leng, what do you think of this house?" Qingqiu said, "It's very good. It's very gorgeous." Yanxi smiled and said, "This is my small study and living room." Qingqiu said, nodding and smiling, she said, "This place is good for studying." Yanxi led her through the double doors and walked around several corridors. At this time, I saw a girl of 16 or 17 years old, wearing black Zhongyun gauze pants, a red flower and white sheer gauze short coat, with a permed braid, exposing her snow-white arms and neck, with a face like the full moon, and hair covered with begonia whiskers. Qingqiu thought, could this be his sister? However, he seems to be much younger. Before she dared to say hello, the girl turned around, walked back, rushed up the steps, and shouted into the room, "Miss Fifth, the guests are here." Only then did Qingqiu realize that she was just a maid. Fortunately, he ignored her, otherwise, wouldn't it be a big joke? While the girl was talking, she opened the Zhongfei bamboo curtain. Yanxi stepped back slightly to let Qingqiu walk in, and then followed. When Qingqiu walked in, he saw a curly-haired woman in a suit. She looked somewhat similar to Yanxi, but her skin was plumper and her complexion was redder. She must be Yanxi's sister. Na Minzi first thought that the girlfriend Yanxi recognized was, of course, a first-class social star. But now he saw Qingqiu white satin robe, white stockings, white satin shoes, and a string of sparkling beads hanging around her neck. She looked like a tree. Pear blossoms are average. He looked like he was only 17 or 18 years old, with double buns. He didn't say anything, and his face turned red for a while. Although Minzi is the seat of civilization, there is no one who would not love such a gentle woman. She didn't wait for Qingqiu to salute, but she took a step forward, stretched out her bare arms that looked like balls of powder, and shook hands with Qingqiu. Yanxi took this opportunity to make introductions on both sides. Minzi took Qingqiu's hand, sat down on a soft chair together, and started talking very cordially. Yanxi had never seen Minzi treat others so kindly, and felt very proud. Then he said to Qingqiu, "Please sit here for a while, I won't accompany you." After that, I rushed to my mother's side to see if they had left. As soon as I inquired about it, Wang Zhai called and urged him to go to the card game, but he had already left early. At this time, Yanxi had no idea and couldn't sit still at home. I wanted to go to Wang's house for a play, but it was still early. It would be pointless to go early, so I walked up and down the corridor alone. Walking to Aunt Kua's yard, I saw a little girl, Yuer, peeling lotus seeds on a small table. Yanxi then asked, "Where is my concubine?" Yuer said, "You have gone out early." Yanxi said, "Who ate these lotus seeds?" Yuer said, "Prepare for the Prime Minister to come to eat in the evening." Yanxi said, "Why don't you ask the kitchen to do it?" Yuer said, "These days, many days, when the Prime Minister comes in the evening, the snacks are all made by my concubine on the fire wine stove. She is afraid that the cook will not cook them cleanly." Yanxi saw that Yuer spoke smartly, and felt pity for a moment. She felt that it was pitiful for a 13 or 14-year-old child to leave his parents at home and work as a girl in someone else's house. There was a bowl of unpeeled lotus seeds piled in the bowl on the table, which was enough for her to peel, so she came over and peeled one for her. Yuer smiled and said, "Master, aren't you afraid of getting your hands dirty?" Yanxi said, "It doesn't matter. I'm worrying here and have nothing to do." So while peeling the lotus seeds, she talked about irrelevant gossip with Yuer. After peeling a bowl of lotus seeds, Yanxi still felt that Yu Yang was a good person. Yuer said, "Master Qi, can I get you some water to wash your hands?" Yanxi raised his head and looked at the sun, and said, "No need to wash your hands, I have something to do." So he walked to his study and rested for a while, then took a car to Wang's house. At this time, the alley in front of Wang's eye was full of cars of all kinds. There are also speculative hawkers carrying fruit burdens and sesame cake baskets, all piled into the carts, doing temporary business. You don't have to go inside, it's very lively outside. A colorful archway had been erected at the entrance, and armed patrol teams were lined up on both sides. Yanxi came by car. The receptionist at the door had already come forward to greet him and asked him to leave a photo. Someone next to him said, "This is young Master Jin Qi. Don't you recognize him?" When the receptionist heard that it was from the Jin family, he hurriedly flashed. After opening a path, Yanxi walked straight to the hall where the opera was performed. I heard someone shouting from behind, "Yanxi, Yanxi, where are you going?" When Yanxi looked back, it was Meng Jizu. Then he asked, "Did you come just now?" Meng Jizu said, "I have been here a long time ago. Why don't you go to the auditorium to pay birthdays and go to the theater first?" Yanxi smiled and said, "I am most afraid of this. And I am. When you meet a longevity grandma, you will have to kowtow." Meng Jizu said, "Are you afraid that you won't go?" Yanxi said, "There are many greeting guests anyway, and they won't remember who comes." Meng Jizu said, "Then let's go to the theater together." He took Yanxi's hand and left. When I walked into the theater, I saw a stand connected on 3 sides surrounding the stage. Those are all seats for female guests. There are rows of chairs in front of the stage, which are the seats of the male guests. Yanxi came in and saw that there were only more than half of the people in the men's seat. The women's seat was already stacked on top of each other, so there was no gap between them. Meng Jizu said, "After all, the ladies don't understand opera as well as the male guests. They will come when the gong sounds, and are reluctant to leave once they come." Yanxi said, "It's probably not impossible to sit still during a performance in the hall. Women, their hearts are calmer than those of men, and it's no wonder that they don't want to leave when they come." When he said that, he looked around and saw Minzi and Qingqiu coming. He was talking while watching the play on stage. Next to Minzi, there was a middle-aged woman with red silk hanging on her chest and red flowers. She was probably an usher. She was there to talk with him. Yanxi thought that since Qingqiu knew this receptionist, even if Minzi left, there would be someone to entertain her in the future, which would not make her feel calm, and she felt relieved. Yura Mo watched the plays, and the guests gradually became crowded. Yanxi looked up and saw that Minzi was gone. Only Qingqiu was there. Qingqiu didn't pay attention to him and seemed not to know yet. I thought to myself, the 5th sister has already left there. Don't let her make another introduction. Everyone already knows each other. It will be inconvenient for the boss. I hesitated for a while and was running out of ideas when I saw the usher approaching the chair and saying, "The banquet has begun. Everyone, please come and take a seat." Half of these guests left after hearing that they were attending the banquet. Yanxi took advantage of the commotion and left the theater. He didn't go to the banquet yet. He went outside and found the waitress he saw just now in the resting area of the waitress. He took off his hat and nodded, smiling. Then he asked, "My surname is Jin. Have you seen my sister?" The receptionist said, "Are you asking about Miss Jin? She has left, but there is a relative who came with her who is still here." Yanxi said, "I was just looking for her. There was a call from her house, asking her to come back." The receptionist believed it and immediately attracted Qingqiu. Qingqiu asked, "Did my mother call?" Yanxi replied vaguely, "Yes. Make a call to me and ask my footman to ask, is there anything? If there is nothing important, the fun is coming later, so there is no need to go back." Qingqiu was reluctant to go back, so she asked where the phone was. Yanxi said, "It's very crowded here. I'll take you to the back to make a phone call." So Yanxi went in front and Qingqiu came in behind. They walked through the door several times, first where people were coming and going, and then gradually moved inside. Room. Qingqiu stopped and said, "Where are we going?" Yanxi said, "It doesn't matter. This is the mother's house. I'm familiar with it everywhere." By this time, it was already getting late. Because it was the beginning of the moon, the night was very bright. When Qingqiu looked forward, he saw a pile of rockery mountains connected to the corridor. It is surrounded by flowers and trees, like a small garden. At this point, she became suspicious and stood still, not daring to move forward. Yanxi said, "There are 2 martial arts plays in succession. The gongs and drums are so loud that my ears are deafened. How about taking a rest here?" Qingqiu stood in the corridor and remained silent. Yanxi said, "Although this garden is small, it is well decorated. We can look at the moonlight here and go to the theater later." Qingqiu said, "I still need to make a phone call." When he said this, his voice, it was much smaller, and I couldn't help but lower my head. Yanxi took a step forward and whispered, "Qingqiu, don't you understand? I have a few words to say to you." Qingqiu held his hands on the pillars and hid his head under his sleeves. Yanxi said, "You are a very open-minded person. Are you still ashamed?" Qingqiu said, "What can we say?" Yanxi said, "I wrote several letters to you. Why do you only reply to me? It's a simple and polite letter, but it doesn't sound like a close friend." Qingqiu smiled and said, "How dare I call you a close friend?" Yanxi held her hand and said, "Don't stand here. Come on. There's an open chair over there. Let's sit there and talk slowly. What do you think?" As he said this, he led Qingqiu away. Although Qingqiu retracted his hand, he followed him. This place is a clump of 1,000-leaf pomegranate flowers, connected to a row of small phoenix-tailed bamboos, and a small open chair lined up under the flowers. In front of the chair, there are many large pots of lotus leaves, which are all green, so when people sit here, they are really surrounded by flowers and are isolated from the outside world. Qingqiu and Yanxi were here, so naturally they could express their deepest admiration for each other. At that time, a semicircular moon was originally covered by several layers of thin clouds. Suddenly, the cloud shadow flashed, revealing the moon which illuminated the place white. 2 figures, side by side underground. Qingqiu felt a little embarrassed when he saw this scene, so he said, "Yes, there are many good plays that I haven't seen yet. I went to listen to the plays." Yanxi said, "You haven't had dinner yet. What are you busy with? You go to eat first. After dinner, you only need to watch the plays. As soon as you get up upstairs, I will go to the gate to drive you back." Qingqiu said, "No, I will hire a car to go back." "Come on." Yanxi said, "I asked the driver not to sound the horn. Then your family will not know that you are going back in my car." Qingqiu said with a smile, "It's hard for you to be thoughtful. Let's do it like that." Qingqiu smoothed his hair with his hands, pressed his hair into a bun, walked out of the flowers, went to the eaves of the corridor, lowered his head and held the skirt of his clothes, and left, first. Yanxi slowly walked out from behind, feeling very happy that her life's wish was completely solved in an instant. Today, just thinking about it like this makes me really happy and smiles on my face. He bowed his head and walked away, forgetting to distinguish between east, west, north and south. When he should have gone south, he turned north instead. He got into trouble and ended up going to Wang's house to go to bed. Looking up, I saw that in the front room, the lights were bright, and there was a table of female guests playing mahjong cards there. Yanxi shrank her feet and turned around to leave, but by chance, she met Wang Yufan. Yufan said, "Hey, when did Lao Qi come?" Yanxi said, "I was here early, and I was watching the show in front," Yanxi said, while looking outside. Yufan grabbed his clothes, said, "Don't go, play the games for me, I will lose badly." Yanxi said, "Aren't there ready-made people playing cards there? How can you lose a person in the audience?" Yufan said, "I rushed ahead to listen to you Tonkin and ask someone to play a few games for me. Now that you are here, of course I want you to play for me." Yanxi said, "They are all female guests. Who are you?" Yufan said, "Are you still afraid of the female guests? Besides, they are all acquaintances. What does it matter?" Yanxi said, "I was delayed for several times, and just as I was about to leave, we met again. You are a robber." Yufan said, "Have you been delayed for several times? Where have you been?" Yanxi said, "Talk to your brother." Yufan said with a smile, "Nonsense, he went first. You were watching cards here, and then we went to the theater together, and you didn't do anything good." Yufan said something casually, but unexpectedly, it caught Yanxi's nerves. His face turned red and he said, "What bad thing did you do? Don't I even know that I'm a guest in your house?" Yufan was also afraid that Yanxi would be angry if she spoke harshly. He smiled and said, "No matter what, you have to play to sets for me anyway." As he said this, he looked out and turned in front of Yanxi, blocking his way, said, "You have to play." Yanxi couldn't get rid of it, so he had to smile and said, okay, I have an appointment in advance. I can only play for sets. If there are more, I won't care." Yufan rolled her eyes and said to Yanxi, smiled slightly, "As long as you go, it doesn't matter how many dishes you have." Yanxi didn't know what medicine she was selling in her gourd, so she had to go with her. Yufan supervised from behind and led Yanxi into the house. This forced Yanxi to sit up and was in a dilemma. It turned out that the people present were Yufan's sister-in-law Yuan, young lady Chen, also a relative of the Wang family, wife Liu Baohua, and none other than Miss Bai Shuju. When they saw Yanxi coming in, they all smiled and nodded, but Bai Shuju had a stern face and was looking at the cards on the table. Yanxi glanced at her. Without saying anything else, just the pair of diamond earrings trembling under her cheeks showed that her heart was in turmoil. He felt a little reluctant, but Yufan knew that he had fallen out with her. If she ignored me, I couldn't ignore her either. So he didn't say anything. Everyone present knew that they were very close friends and could be casual when they met, so no one paid any attention. The two of them were having a big quarrel in their hearts. Only Yufan understood what was going on here, so she winked at her sister-in-law Yuan and asked, "You've lost a lot to me again. You're not a good enough gunman. I'll find someone else." Yuan understood and stood up and said with a smile, "Seventh Master, you come." Young Madam Chen laughed and said, "Oh, that won't work. Miss Bai sits at the top, and he sits at the bottom. Can you guarantee that they won't collude with each other? As long as Miss Bai is a little loose, we can't stand it." Bai Shuju pressed Yuan's hand and said, "Don't leave, let's do it. Otherwise, Sister Yufan can go on stage by herself." Yufan laughed and said, "People are joking, and you get anxious. Do you really think that you two will let Zhang Zi play cards? Even if you are good friends, you don't have to worry about this." Shuju said, "What are you talking about? Am I so heartless?" Yufan said, "Then why don't you let Lao Qi play?" Shuju looked at the cards on the table and deliberately didn't look at Yanxi. She said, "I mean, it's inconvenient to keep changing people at the table. I can't control whether others play or not." When Shuju said this, both Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Liu could see that she must have had a quarrel with Yanxi. Yufan tried to mediate, and everyone was getting more excited. Young Madam Chen said, "Seventh Master, you have to sit down and play. If you don't, I'll take my joke seriously." Yufan held Yanxi with one hand and didn't let go. Yanxi couldn't get away, and she was afraid that people would see through her trick, so she sat down with a smile and said, "There are only people who hire gunmen to play, but no one who forces gunmen to play. Third sister-in-law is really detaining me." After playing cards, Yufan held the back of the chair and listened to how they started talking. In this first game, Mrs. Liu won. Shuju embedded the whiteboard and touched to bamboos, so she should collect the small winning money. Yanxi won barefoot, so she should give Shuju the money, because she turned around and talked about cards with young Madame Chen and forgot about it. Shuju asked Yufan, "Sister Yufan, what is your hand?" "I'm 20. Yufan laughed and said, "Strange. You don't ask the players, but ask me who looks at the cards. What is it for me to do?" Shuju said, "You lost money and don't want to pay. Are you going to default on the debt, or what?" Yufan said, "I have sent a representative. The representative has full authority to deal with it. Otherwise, why would I send a representative?" Shuju said, "Let's not talk about that. Are you going to give me the money?" The two of them quarreled, and Yanxi found out. Looking at the cards, he said, "We are 8-handed looking for 12-handed. Then he took 4 chips and put them in front of Shuju. Shuju said to Yufan again, "What 8-handed do you mean? I didn't see it." Yufan said, "You are so long-winded. Didn't I tell you that I don't play cards? So how can I know what the hand is? I'm not a post office, delivering messages for others. You don't want me to look at the cards behind you, so I won't look at them, okay?" After saying that, Yufan flashed and went behind Mrs. Chen. Shuju had no choice. I had to forget it. Yanxi sorted out the cards while thinking, I just ate to bets and didn't touch them, so where did the 8-handed come from? At this time, Chen Xiao Madam smiled and said, "7th Master, aren't you looking for my small hand?" Yanxi thought about it and realized that she was actually 8-handed, so she took out a big chip and found 2 small chips. Shuju saw it and asked, "4th sister-in-law, aren't you 8-handed? Why are you asking for money?" Chen Xiao Madam smiled and said, "My 8-handed is specially enlarged, he should give me money." Shuju said, "I know, this is injustice." Yanxi didn't listen to that. He lowered his head and laughed and went out. When he walked into the theater, he ran into Wang Yechen, the young master of the Wang family. He smiled and said, "Yanxi, when did you come?" Yanxi said casually, "Just arrived." Wang Yechen pointed at Yanxi and said, "You are afraid of birthday celebrations, so you come at this time, right?" Yanxi blushed and said, "I was delayed during the day and couldn't make it. The 3rd brother came. Can't he represent me?" Wang Yechen said, "He is the son-in-law, and it is his real name to pay his respects. You are the nephew, so shouldn't you go and bow?" Yanxi said, "You are right. Please take me to the upper room to pay my respects." Yechen laughed and said, "I am just joking with you. I am afraid of this myself. In addition, the people under our family are double-faced bastards. They all went to the birthday hall to kowtow. My father and mother only perfunctorily asked me to stop them in the hall. Just after sending them away, some young ladies who arrived earlier had already come, so I had to avoid them. Afterwards, I went to kowtow alone, which was not a rule, so I just let it go. I did the same. Let alone my relatives?" Yanxi laughed and said, "Is this what you should say as a son?" Wang Yechen said, "Filial piety to parents depends on whether you are sincere or not. You don't care about this kind of hypocritical etiquette. I am telling the truth. Let's go and watch the show." He took Yanxi's arm and walked into the theater. Yanxi's eyes had already shot to the upstairs, where he saw Qingqiu still sitting in her previous seat, while his mother and Miley had left, probably to attend a banquet. Seeing that he was paying attention to the upstairs, Wang Yechen covered half of his face with his palm and said to his ear, "There is a beauty upstairs, do you see her?" Yanxi frowned and said, "Be more serious." Wang Yechen said, "You have to take a look at this person. If you don't, you have come here in vain today." Yanxi became a little impatient when he heard this, and said, "I want to listen to the opera, don't make a fuss." Wang Yechen still smiled and said, "You have said for a long time that you wanted to meet my Dabilu. She is here today, and I wanted to introduce her to you, but you didn't want to." Yanxi suddenly realized and laughed quickly. "I blamed you wrongly. Where is that person?" Wang Yechen pointed to the front stand with his mouth and said with a smile, "The one wearing light pink clothes, wearing a goose yellow silk scarf, with a crescent-shaped haircut, white skin and a slightly round face." Yanxi said, I saw it, don't add so many adjectives." Wang Yechen said with a smile, "How is it? Peach calyx drooping with dew, apricot blossoms moist with smoke. Can it be evaluated with these 8 words?" Yanxi said, "Where did you find these 8 words?" Wang Yechen said, "Don't look down on me, I am also studying now. That person graduated from high school and ranked 1st in Chinese. I thought to myself, if I don't study hard, I will make a scene when I get married tomorrow. Wouldn't it be embarrassing for the husband? Yanxi said, you are so unruly. Be careful that your wife will be unhappy when you see it. Wang Yechen said with a smile, it doesn't matter. She knows that I am very naughty, and she is used to seeing me like this. It doesn't matter. Yanxi stole a glance at the stage, and Qingqiu happened to be looking downstairs. When she saw Yanxi, she stood up. Yanxi understood and said to Wang Yechen, I'll go find something to eat and come back soon. You wait here. Yanxi walked to the back and met Qingqiu. Qingqiu said, who are you talking to? He is looking at the old watchtower. Yanxi said, do you think he is looking at you? He is looking at his lover. Qingqiu laughed and said, this is obviously your nonsense. Yanxi said, why don't you believe it? Look, is he looking at you or at the opposite side? Qingqiu whispered, don't talk. There are people coming and going here. Go to the door and drive the car and wait for me. Yanxi heard that he really went ahead and found the car. When he drove to the door, the driver opened the door, Qingqiu got in the car, and Yanxi was already sitting in the car. Qingqiu said, can't you drive yourself? Yanxi said, I can drive. Qingqiu said, with a smile, since you can drive, why don't you drive me back yourself? I don't want the chauffeur to know about this. Yanxi said, what's the big deal? I've driven my car to send guests off more than once. What's there to keep secret? Qingqiu said with a smile, I heard you can dance. You must have a lot of girlfriends, right? Yanxi heard this and felt that he had given himself away, so he said with a smile, I used to have this hobby, but I found that kind of socializing very boring. Since I moved next door to your house, I have become much more unfamiliar with those dancers. Qingqiu said, then why? Yanxi also asked, why do you say? Qingqiu smiled and refused to speak. As they were talking, the car was driving very fast. Qingqiu looked outside and saw that they were almost home, so he said to Yanxi, tell the chauffeur not to honk the horn. Yanxi said, it doesn't matter if your mother knows that I drove you back. I see your mother is very polite to me and doesn't dislike me. Qingqiu kicked her feet and said, you'd better tell him not to honk otherwise. Yanxi didn't wait for her to finish, and said, didn't you say it first? I told them a long time ago. There's nothing you say that I can't do. Do you need to say it a second time? Qingqiu said, then please get out of the car right away, okay? Yanxi said the word okay and stood up to ask the driver to stop the car. Qingqiu stopped him with his hand and forced Yanxi to sit down. He smiled and said, sit down, and don't make trouble. Yanxi said, I plan to go to Zishan for fun tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I want to invite you to go with me. Is that okay? Qingqiu said, why go to Zishan all the way? I won't go. Yanxi said, Zishan is so fun this day, why not go? You must go. Before he finished speaking, the car had arrived at Qingqiu's door and stopped. The driver jumped out of the car and went to open the door. Yanxi grabbed Qingqiu's hand and asked, are you going? Qingqiu was eager to get away, so he just said go and got off the car. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.